Okay, hello, good morning. Well, technically still 11:54, so good morning to all, and thank you for coming to this breakout session. We are going to discuss a little bit some issues and maybe some opportunities and challenges around dealing with end-of-life equipment. We have been discussing quite for a long time life cycle of refrigerants in the Montreal Protocol, but not less important is the management of the equipment that contain these refrigerant. We should never forget that in the end, this is quite a large quantity of equipment, both in volume and in weight. And as countries move more and more on issues related to circular economy and the whole global discussions about e-waste management that has any other implications, environmental and health implications with the use of critical minerals, heavy metals, plastics, then it becomes a much more relevant issue because it interconnects with EPR schemes, circular economy policies in countries, and other financial schemes that goes a little bit beyond the refrigerant itself. So we have a very important panel here of experts. They are going to help us with experiences and guidance. So I urge you to please use the opportunity and squeeze their brains to get ideas and a good discussion about it. I'll first start with Ms. Francesca Seni, who is a program management officer of the Science and Technical Assistance branch of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention Secretariat. And she's going to introduce a little bit these issues related to management of equipment in front of these international regulations set out by this convention. So, Francesca, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this breakout session and to present a new guidance document that is being developed under the Basel Convention by the Partnership for Action on Challenges Relating to E-Waste, on ESM of used and waste refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment. But what is the Partnership for Action on Challenges Relating to E-Waste, or PACE2? Well, the partnership program under the Basel Convention has a long history, and in particular, the first partnership established was on mobile phones, and this group included a lot of stakeholders, especially the manufacturers, and had the objective of developing guidance documents on how to recycle, collect, repair mobile phones. Followed, this partnership closed, and then another one was opened, the PACE, the Partnership for Action on Computing Equipment. And also this partnership developed pilot projects, national regulations for the management of e-waste, and then it was also closed. So after MPPI and PACE, the parties thought a bit and decided to open up a new phase of PACE with a larger scope and with similar, let's say, terms of reference. And this has become PACE2 in 2022. It was established by the decision 1522, and it has the goal of strengthening the ESM of e-waste with focus on 5 e-waste streams. In reality, PACE2 inherited the mandate of the previous partnerships, so the waste streams are mobile phones, computing equipment, but there are two three important new waste streams, which are TV screens, audio and video equipment, and refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment. As the previous partnerships, the goals are similar. The partnership has the objective of transferring technologies, knowledge, sharing information on the ESM of used and waste equipment in the scope. And I will speak later on what it means, this used. As it was mentioned in the panel this morning, it is an issue. And then the tasks include dissemination activities, outreach, education, training, and then the scale up of projects with the involvement of the private sector, projects for the ESM of the 5 waste streams, but also projects and activities to foster the development of e-waste legislation, regulations, such as, for example, EPRs that were mentioned this morning also. And last but not least, because I'm going to present it today, the development of guidance documents on ESM of used and waste equipment, of refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment, among others, because we are also working on TVs with a similar guidance. I would like to introduce the issue of used and waste. So, as you have seen, the parties have taken different approaches to including used equipment under the Basel Convention as waste or not. So there is, for example, the EU approach where repair and refurbishment can be an operation for used equipment, which is still a product, or on waste equipment, which is being discarded in the EU, so it is a waste. But there are also other approaches. Canada, for example, in Canada, used equipment are products, and repair and refurbishment can only be done on products, not on waste. And in Latin America, used and waste equipment is used interchangeably. And so, as you can see, the parties to the Basel Convention have implemented the waste definition in different ways, depending on their circumstances and their needs. In African countries, for example, to avoid dumping of used equipment, used equipment are often defined as waste. And there are only exceptions allowed in certain countries, and they can be imported as products in certain cases. So the context and in the world is very different. And this is going to be discussed at the next COP, because there is a proposal, or there will be a discussion on a new operation which is called preparation for reuse, which may be included or not in the operations under the Basel Convention. But this is just a small introduction to the fact that the parties have decided that the partnerships have a larger scope, and they look at used equipment. The partnerships will not define, and especially this partnership, if used equipment is waste or not, will not look at this issue, but will just look at ESM, are good practices for repair and refurbishment of used equipment, and then at the national level, this used equipment will be waste or product, and this will depend on national legislation. Now, the membership of this partnership is open to a large group of stakeholders. Of course, parties, signatories to the Basel Convention, the Basel and Stockholm regional centers, international organizations, NGOs, academia, and new municipalities, municipal companies, and also any experts who may contribute to the work of the partnership. Now, the membership includes 21 Basel and or Stockholm regional centers, 22 country representatives, 19 private sector representatives, These are very widely distributed. We have the OEMs, so the producers of electronics, recyclers, other partnerships. These are some associations. We have 2 governmental bodies or agencies, 8 international organizations, 3 NGOs, 7 observers, which are actually quite active and very, very important, especially the WHO, the WE Forum, the ILO. And so overall, the partnership reaches out to over 1,000 entities active on ESM of e-waste, including academia, educational groups, and youth groups also. And now I would like to introduce this draft guidance. First, I have to say that the guidance is a draft. So it's not yet ready. It will be discussed at the next COP, hopefully, but it seems that more time is required. It may be adopted in 2027. And this is exactly because there is a discussion on preparation for reuse, but also under the Basel Convention there are there is a very important process on the review of the annexes, which may change some aspects of the guidance document. So we don't know yet, depending on the parties, but it is possible that this guidance remains open until 2027. And what is the audience of the guidance? It's not a guidance directed straight to governments. It is, of course, important for the policymakers, but it is a guidance developed by together with the private sector, because the partnerships have a special way of working under the Basel Convention. Everyone is on the same decision-making level. Normally, as you know, under the conventions, the parties have the right to change the documents, to make decisions. Others are observers. In the partnerships, not. So, in fact, this guidance reaches out to the private sector, to recyclers, to operators, collectors, those involved in the ESM. And it is developed normally under the Basel Convention with the leadership of 2 co-chairs, one from government and one from the private sector. And this is also the case of this guidance document. So in the first part, it is, as you can see, there are 3 parts. The first part includes the introduction, and the introduction also of the Montreal Protocol and other relevant international agreements. Part 2 is a guidance on environmentally sound testing, refurbishment, and repair of used and waste equipment of refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment. And here we have a lot of discussions on this title, because it's repair of used and waste. And some countries do not repair waste. So what is waste is just something to be disposed of. So, but again, we have some leverage in the partnerships to be more open, to be more comprehensive. So the parties decided that this part 2 is on repair and refurbishment. And part 3 is on ESM of waste equipment of refrigerators, cooling and heating equipment. And here you have all the disposal operations, the operations related to, well, we'll see more in detail afterwards. What is important is to mention the annexes, because here we have all the references, but very importantly, there is a glossary of terms, because the parties under the Basel Convention agreed upon certain terms. What is prevention, what is minimization, what is, for example, a recovery, which is defined in different ways in different countries. And so also it was difficult to find an agreement. And also remanufacturing, or what is we, the definition of we, and so far and so forth. So I go in a little bit in detail. But I just highlight, just for the discussion, certain very important or more important paragraphs or subparagraphs of the guidance. In part 1, in particular, there is a reference to hazardous substances in equipment, and CFCs, HCFCs, and HFCs are of course mentioned, but not only. So this equipment is this guidance covers also other refrigerants which are not under the Montreal Protocol, because it looks at overall at this waste stream and how it can be managed. So it refers to multilateral environmental agreements and of course the Montreal Protocol, the Kigali Amendment, and others, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. It looks at sustainable financing for the ESM of used and waste equipment, and prevention and minimization of the generation of waste equipment, and energy efficiency. So there will be considerations for those who would like to change or phase in more efficient equipment, to see which are the criteria or the decision trees that at the national level or at the facility level are necessary to decide if an appliance is to be repaired, or is better to dispose of it as a waste because it's not energy efficient, and others. This is just a mentioning of some sections. Part 2 is on repair and refurbishment of used equipment. So you will find subparagraphs on deciding the recovery pathway, the replacement of gases, how to remarket repaired equipment, what are the best practices for labeling, for checking, for preparing for transport, and so far and so forth. And then part 3 is on ESM of waste, includes general treatment requirements, how to remove the refrigerants and blowing agents containing CFCs, HFCs, and hydrocarbons. So it's overall includes controlled substances and non-controlled substances. And then the preparation for the equipment for further treatment, the manual removal of materials, the mechanical treatment, and speaks about some resulting materials and how they can be reused in new processes or best practices in this field. For example, ferrous metals, non-ferrous metals, polyurethane foams, plastics, and how to deal with the residual fraction. And here I have some pictures and some examples of how the recycling products from refrigerators, cooling, and heating equipment are being reused. Here, for example, there is granulated copper from cable stripping or shredding of the copper parts, which can be resold as copper. And then a picture of the inside of a fridge compressor, where the copper can be segregated manually or mechanically, and then it can be sent for smelting or recovery into new products. Shredded ferrous metals from the casing of a refrigerator, which then can be reused. And plastics, the plastic issue is very, very important, because it is very important to understand which is the POP content of the plastics. So here we have a POP's content below the limits, and so it's classified as non-hazardous, and it can be recycled. As you know, there is an exception for the recycling of e-waste for certain POPs, but plastics containing POPs cannot be recycled. So it is very important for a circular economy to identify POPs in plastics. And then we have below the polyurethane foam from a fridge recycling process, and what happens with the foams. For example, some facilities may choose to pelletize it or create briquettes, or some can recover it as pure product for reused, or can be mixed with concrete or used as thermal energy substitute for or sent for incineration. These are just examples of how the recycling products can be reused. This was a very brief presentation, and so I thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to leave this message. This is an open document. The Ozone Secretariat is a member of the partnership and actively involved in the development of the document. But if you would like to contribute to it, to bring case studies, your experience, or read it when we circulate it, because there is a small group of experts who are drafting, and then there is a period when the draft is commented. Please join us, join the Ozone Secretariat, make this document a better, more useful document for developing countries, for developed countries, and also a very good document for Basel Convention, for the implementation of the Basel Convention and the implementation of the Montreal Protocol, so that the Basel Convention parties and stakeholders can become also your allies in the implementation of the Montreal Protocol. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Francesca. I think it was very interesting because with the Kigali Amendment, we are discussing energy efficiency. And then in the energy efficiency, we discussed the linkage between the ozone officer, the energy environment, the energy officers, the Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Health, which houses the ozone unit, and with ministries of power, energy in the government. And then when we talk about refrigerant management, which will lead to the great deal of e-waste in the future, then we also need to think about linkage with the Basel Convention and the Stockholm Convention. The good news is that probably the focal points of these conventions are already inside the Ministry of Environment. So in theory, it should be easy to national ozone units to make these connections. But nevertheless, it's a little bit more of work that is required to do. One thing that I would like to also mention as a food for thought in our discussions, at least from our standpoint as implementing agency, when we look into profile of countries now that we are preparing the KIP, we can largely separate the developing countries in two big groups. One group that has a high level of penetration of cooling equipment. So in a great part, strategies over management of HFCs are very tight on how you're going to manage this population of equipment, because they are demanding large part of HFCs, either in cars, air conditioners, refrigerators. So the problem for these countries is burning much more in terms of management of e-waste, because it's something that will knock your doors very early in the process. While the other group is countries that have a very little penetration of cooling equipment. So basically, their problem in managing HFCs is about economic growth, because the country cannot stop their building their buildings, providing air conditioning for thermal comfort, or expanding their cold supply chain. So this problem will come later in the process, but the countries should be prepared when it comes, because they need to provide this type of answer very quickly to their stakeholders. And thinking about it, we have here in the panel also Tiago Pietrobon, who is Brazilian. He's president of the Environment Department of the Brazilian Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Association. And he's also manager of this company EcoSupport in Brazil that manages the refrigerant life cycle and also equipment. And I remember, I am Brazilian also, was in Brazil 15 years ago when the utilities started to replace domestic air conditioners as part of the energy efficiency program. At that time, large base of the refrigerators had still CFC 12. So in matters of 2 or 3 months, suddenly they were able to replace 400 up to 800,000 refrigerators. And then the Ministry of Environment realized what we are going to do, because we cannot only vent. So a huge movement that encompasses all these stakeholders was put in place to recover the gas and to properly manage the end-of-life equipment. And the country didn't have a structure for that. So what took 3 months to be replaced, the refrigerators, took almost 1 year to dismantle the refrigerators, because everything was done manually. It was a huge challenge and a very relatively high cost that required this new approach. So I would like to ask Tiago, minding these experiences and also what you see in Brazil now after 15 years, after we knowing that we have automated plant to dismantle refrigerators in Brazil, for example, how can countries with limited infrastructure began to implement these processes of dismantling equipment and disposing HCFCs and HFCs? So, Tiago?
Thank you, Anderson. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, the Ozone Secretariat, for the opportunity. Everybody listen. I don't know if it's better now. Well, we do you ask me about the how the countries? I take some notes here about using especially the task force report to bring us some pointments, but specifically about the countries. How the countries can be this, I think we can start by establishing a data collection system that can be used to inform decision making. This collecting of data, this tracking of the equipment of the refrigerant is so important, not just for the policymakers, but the business too, because it's bring us information about how can we apply money with low risks. So tracking HFC, as I said, used by sector and substances, provide crucial insights to economic policies development. Encourage the development of standards and process. And now the guidance show us how this is important to us, again, to make more clear the way, no? This could guide the market. And the additionality, promote the infrastructure needed for the return of equipments or just the used refrigerants is part of a reverse supply chain or circular economy approach. I think this is the beginning of this conversation about how countries can do this.
Thank you, Tiago. I would also like to introduce Par Anton Purnomo, who is director of the Basel Convention Regional Center that is based in Indonesia, in Jakarta. We talk about the guidelines and the problem that we are going to face in the future, having potentially all these quantities of e-waste to treat in our countries. And Tiago also exemplified minimum first steps that we should start to take. But as Tiago said, this is part of a circular economy. So basically, when you dismantle an equipment, and then you end up with these parts, let's say, that Francesca mentioned, you have it because you want to reinsert in the supply chain, right? We know, for instance, that plastic is a problem by themselves because it's almost non-recycled depending the type of plastics. PU foam also at a certain point is useless, so what many countries decide to do is just to landfill it. But you have more, let's say, noble ferrous and non-ferrous materials. But there are countries that are so small that they don't have the supply chain, right? You don't have a melter in the country to melt copper and reuse because you don't have a melter or you don't have an industry to have demand. And then it comes transboundary movement. So based on your regional experience, how you see these evolving? You see that the countries are prepared, or also in front of the Basel Convention and the future amendment about the IPIC for e-waste, how these may impact this supply chain? Over to you.
Thank you, Anderson. Also, thank you, Liasat, for inviting us here. Yeah, you're right. When we are talking on the circular economy, of course, some countries also need this scrap on this e-waste or use electronic as to fill the gap in the countries because they don't produce a lot, and then they can use it to add something in terms of their national economic. However, some countries also don't have really sophisticated facility to treat all of these things, especially in developing countries. And we took note that, for example, if we are talking about plastic in 2018, since China closed the border, all plastic scrap goes to other Asian countries, and it really become a problem in that time. We took note, for example, in Indonesia, we have to repatriate 1,200 containers that containing plastic scrap and also hazardous material that is containing on it. But in Basel Convention, the plastic amendment entered into force in 2021, and since that time, the transboundary movement of plastic scrap can be controlled, and then it's really reduced drastically since 2021 until now. And however, in terms of the electronic waste, some of used electronic waste still going around, especially in this region, in the Asian. And then, but of course, in Basel Convention, it is already adopted that in 2025 January, all movement of e-waste or used electronic will be under the PIC procedure, which is the prior informed consent. So in case countries' destination, they already have and they already know that they have facility in their country to treat this kind of electronic waste, so they will inform the originating country, okay, you can move your e-waste to our country. Otherwise, it will be restricted, or it will be banned to come the shipment, because once the ship comes, it will be very difficult and costly to repatriate. So it is very important to inform in advance whether it is okay or not to be sent from the originating country to the destination country. So we in the Southeast Asia, we have also on the ASEAN network on preventing illegal transboundary movement. Just last week we had not last week because this is Sunday. So just yesterday we just finished our ASEAN network meeting in Laos, in Vientiane, and Vientiane is very unique. Laos is very unique country in this region in the Southeast Asia. Most of Southeast Asia have a seaport, but Laos do not have seaport, so it is landlocked country. So they have, but they have the dry port. It is unique also. I mean, but the dry port is operated by private sectors. So it is very unique because usually in the seaport is belong to the government, but in this case it is belong to the private sectors. But of course they put some of custom officer and other government parts inside. But it is very unique situation where they also what you call it able to prepare themselves in terms of this incoming Basel e-waste amendment. So in order to protect the country from receiving a lot of electronic waste in the future. So yeah, it's good. It's good to know that they also are capable to do that, because the private sectors, because it is built by the private sector, so they have also a good facility. For example, like infrared, something like that. So they know inside the container what is the stuff, the goods, something like that. So uh, yes, I think of course it will the transboundary of electronics use electronic is also helping the countries in the circular of national circular economy, but they have also be ready not to receive a lot of or too much waste e-waste, especially when it is end into life waste, something like that. So for example, they receive some use electronic, but after 2 3 months it is broken, cannot be used, something like that. So it will be also not good for this the destination country. So I think that's it. Back to you, understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Panton. So I'll open the floor. If you have any question, please raise your hands, and I will kindly ask you to introduce yourself before making a question. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Inez. I'm from the Seychelles Island. Like you said, we are a small developing country, and we do not have any major industries for this kind of waste dismantling. So that you find that all our e-waste, you name it, fridge, TV, everything goes to the landfill. And being a small island, it is becoming a big issue. We are running out of space. So, do you have any countries that, do you know of any countries that accept it? So, because you find that tourism is one of our major economic pillar, and we have quite a lot of importation of cooling system. And due to the fact that we are a maritime island, so you find that corrosion is very high. Yeah. So after 5 6 years, you find that the unit is almost corroded, even if you use those preventive solution, and then you find all the whole thing is being dumped into the landfill. So that is a major issue for us. So if you know of any countries that accept it to dismantle, to reuse it, we'll be very happy to know it. Thank you.
Just if there is any other question. Okay. Oh, Mr. Subram.
Thank you, Mr. Facilitator, and good afternoon to all. This is S.V. Subbarao from India. I have a question regarding the guidance document which was being proposed. Does that guidance document also take into consideration the national frameworks in place? Because at least I don't know about many countries, but at least in our countries, as we presented in the morning, we have a regulations, e-waste rules. In that, there are clear provisions on how to handle the waste of electronic equipment, including the RAC equipment, that only authorized recyclers need to be took, and they do, and then there are particular processes also on how the equipment which has been collected, they needs to be destructed. So those type of things, this is one example of our country. There may be similar examples of, so all these have been considered while framing the guidance document. And how does that document synchronize with the existing frameworks? That I would like to have a better understanding. Thank you.
Kuwait, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Yaqub Al-Matoug. I'm the Ozone Officer of Kuwait. So, first of all, I would like to thank you, facilitator, and thank the presenters. And my question is to Francesca, because we are doing a guide. And from our experience under Montreal Protocol, if we don't have the right terminology of everything then we are in a big problem to define that issues, because from that definitions, we will start building on that definition, and then we will find that that definition was not workable for us. So we have to be very careful of that terminologies that we are using is none affecting other project or other entities or other international agreement. So when you are mentioning that the main issue for us is that is a waste or it's a used. So this is very crucial under Montreal Protocol for us, because when you say it's waste, it means that that cannot be funded forever. It's a waste. So country try to use used, so to be used as a retrofitting. So the Montreal Protocol can sometime have a window of fund for retrofitting equipment with refrigerant, old refrigerant to the new refrigerant. And this is the process coming only for the refrigeration sectors, which is air condition and refrigerator. So you have to take this in your mind when you are putting the guide. There is a financial mechanism that will be affected for countries to be handled there. The third point is what we are doing that about the recover and recycle. That system is working very slowly, and it's not being objective to developing countries. Within this regime now, there are 2 treaties monitoring that one. I don't think anybody will work with that one. And especially that there is a lot of banks of refrigerant will not be used in the several regions, because the equipment are already dismantled and this refrigerant is there, recycled. So they need to shift it to other regions. And now we will come to the Basel borders issues. So you have to put it in your mind also, how these things can transfer, and it's monitored under Basel and monitored under Montreal Protocol. So you need 2 international entities or treaties to just make one cylinder transfer from my country to Saudi Arabia, which is 1 hour movement. So I will not do it. So the best thing for me is say this is God wishes, this goes to the sky. I don't know. It was not there, so I don't know what's happened to it. Thank you.
We have 2 more questions, so I'll take these 2 and then we go to answers. Otherwise, we don't have time. So, yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Catherine Witherspoon with the Climate Works Foundation, and we support NGOs working on HFC mitigation. It seems to me that the greatest value of an international convention, this international convention, is the access to industry, which is not present in other cases. But what's missing is any kind of EPR, so that they take responsibility at the start and pay into a global fund to deal with the kinds of processes you're recommending be undertaken at the end. So I think that should be, top priority for adding to the document and negotiating with the industry itself.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia.
Thank you so much, Anderson. Thank you so much for the speakers for their informative presentation. So I want to build up on my friend, colleague from Kuwait about the terminology to Francesca, that there is a huge difference between waste and used. And I want to talk about the refrigeration only, the refrigerants. In my country, we have faced a challenge that was presented by one of the stakeholders from the private sector, who are a reclamation center. They have faced a lot of transportation fees because they are dealing with the hazardous waste, and they have to comply to the regulation, which would cost them much more than if it's a refrigerant to be used or to be reclaimed and then go back to the equipment. So I think this is one of the challenges to the reclamation centers, that they will cost much more if they are reclaiming this refrigerant or they are taking it to the destruction facilities. So I just want to make sure that terminology is well defined in this guideline. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to now to the round of clarifications before we can open again. Just before addressing Seychelles, that I think it is an open question, right? Anyone can respond. I'm not going to put colleagues here in the hotspot, specifically recommending countries or stakeholders. I would suggest you to take bilaterally if you need names. On the lunch, yeah. But I would ask them to respond to you in terms more generally, how you can look into holistically, how you can investigate, so if it is possible. Just before they start to answer, I would also recommend you, if Seychelles didn't have access yet, to consider the funding opportunity from the MELEF about ODS, unwanted ODS, because I imagine this is precisely to help you to address this, to not the whole e-waste in general, but at least the refrigerant. Great, because in theory you should use this money also to understand your supply chain and see where you can export, and also the bureaucracy involved, the IPIC next year, all the Basel authorizations, etc. But to the panelists, if you want to take it, thank you.
I'll try to answer briefly. First of all, I would like to thank you for these questions because they touch upon very important issues. Some are resolved in the guidance, but some are not. So it's very nice that you have raised them. So to the representative of the Seychelles, there are several solutions in small islands. And actually, we well, the executive secretary of the BRS is from the Seychelles, and we have yeah, and we have hosted a student who's been working on a thesis on how to manage e-waste in the Seychelles, and she has been looking for solutions, but really practical solutions in terms of alliances with shipping lines, countries who could receive the waste, or really practical solutions, for example, establishing an initial dismantling unit. And so there is some work in progress, but we have to wait that this kind of student becomes gets out of university. So this is just to mention that we have been working with small islands, developing states, and the islands sometimes ally, and they build partnerships with the shipping lines because they don't have a big stock. So what they do is that they ask these lines to take the e-waste for free, because they bring containers, and when they bring back the containers, they just load them. And this is one of the best practices that we found. So this requires, for example, a temporary storage facility, which sometimes has to be agreed with several islands, and it is on one island. And then the shipping lines are working and helping the countries, the islands, to deal with this issue. This is just an example. And so there are solutions, but there is a lot of work. Yeah. So, and to the representative of India, I would like to say that this issue of national legislation is tackled in the guidance already. Before, at the beginning of the section 2 on used equipment and repair and refurbishment, there is a reference to national legislation, exactly because we don't know the status of used equipment, and to mention that actually this has to be clarified at the national level, what is the status, and this is repeated also at the beginning of the section 3. So each operator which is putting in place the guidance needs to comply with national legislation in terms of waste management, and legislation on EPRs and on other elements, also personal protective equipment and types of legislation in place in the country. So this is covered, and of course the details are not there. There are just sections on health and safety with references to standards, to international standards, and sections on the involvement of the informal sector, because this is a very important element in every not every, but in many developing countries, the pickers, the waste pickers, how the country deals with the social issue of poor people picking waste is also in the refrigerator sector, the cooling sector is very important. On the terminology, this is a burning issue under the Basel Convention, so it's really very important. But a lot of work has been done under the Basel Convention to agree upon the terminology, and this is why there is the glossary of terms. This glossary of terms is the result of 6 years of work of an expert group to agree upon the definitions, which in some countries have a legal relevance, in some countries not. Then there are differences. There are countries for which recovery is everything, like in the EU, and countries for which recovery is something very small, like in the rest of the world. But under the Basel Convention, countries have agreed upon these definitions. Also, under the Basel Convention, disposal operations are both recycling and final disposal operations. And in some countries, in the majority of the countries, disposal operations define the status of waste. So if there is a disposal operation carried out on something, that's a waste, because the definition of waste is that it's a substance or an object that is being disposed of, intended to be disposed of, or needed to be disposed of by national legislation. Therefore, disposal, what is disposal, in many countries defines the waste status. But it is upon the countries to define what is, if used equipment is to be treated as a waste in transboundary movement or not, and in national legislation, how it is circular economy, how it is applied. And this is really, for the Basel Convention, is on and off. If it's non-waste, there is no Basel Convention applied. If it's waste, the Basel Convention applies. So it's a big yes and no. It's like a switch on button, on off. And all the e-waste amendments, the plastic waste amendments, they do not apply if it's not a waste. So the countries sometimes, when they have very heavy legislation on transboundary movements, they say, no, this is used equipment because it's not waste, therefore I can move it, and maybe it's a waste in reality. But so just to say that the convention applies to waste. And if a country wants to take things out of the convention, they usually say this is a product. We need to think of this issue, of course, that you have raised. This is a very important one of having operations authorized if it is a waste, and other operations authorized only if it's used under the multilateral fund. This we'll have to think of it with the Ozone Secretariat and the help and see. So it's true that these products or waste are monitored by 2 agreements. This is true, and we are developing a report on how on the linkages between the 2 agreements. Hopefully there will be also experiences. We hope under PACE 2 to develop case studies on cooperation, how to work together, and use the 2 conventions in the best way possible for the countries. So this is also work in progress. And so if you can contribute any examples, please join us. And the answer to the representative of the Climate Work Foundation, if I have mentioned correctly your entity. So this is the issue of having a global fund established by industry is being discussed quite a lot. The funds are established by government with fees, with taxes, with advanced fees, with the EPR system for industry, it's very difficult to establish a global fund because not all the industries will participate, and automatically those who participate will be playing in a field which is not leveled. Even though companies are doing a lot or as much as they could to really recover, take back, and to somehow monitor how their products are surviving the product phase, so becoming waste. And it's also difficult to establish a global program because the EPR system is established at a national level, and a global EPR is something which could, this is what the parties to the Basel Convention say sometimes, it could undermine the ESM because it may attract waste in developing countries which are not able to manage them. So there are a lot of discussions on this issue, but there is no solution for the moment. We have some examples where fees, for example, in Ghana are paid at the ports. When the e-waste is shipped to Ghana, then the fees are collected before they arrive from international sources. This is one of the models which stakeholders are monitoring to see if it can work, for example. So there are solutions that can be developed, but when we come to the global scale, it's not easy. It's not easy to find the right solution, because the situation of the countries is very different. So the transportation fees discussed, the issue raised by Saudi Arabia, this issue is linked to the Basel Convention and not. We called it a negative incentive to circular economy. And this is linked to the fact, for example, that when this hazardous waste is shipped, the shipping lines are requiring a lot of money in insurance, and this is not linked to the Basel Convention but to other maritime conventions, and needs to be analyzed and understood at the national level when there is a relationship with these shipping lines and the ports, and so it's an issue to be resolved at the national level, which arises from other conventions. It is true that the transboundary movements require guarantee, but that's something that often can be given back to the operator when the transboundary movement is finished. It's just a guarantee in case there is a problem or a case of illegal traffic and the transboundary movement needs to be taken back or reshipped. So it has a different nature and is not something that the operator will lose. Let's say if everything goes well, money goes back to the operator.
Thank you. Yes, Egypt?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Izzat Lewis. I am the Ozone Officer of Egypt. And to be short, I have two small questions. The first one, as I understand that you classified the unused refrigerant as a hazardous waste. So under Basel Convention, when we need to ship the unwaste refrigerant from one country to another, do we need the pre-notification as this is Basel Convention when you transboundary the waste you have to send a pre-notification to other country. So this is the first question. And second question, do you under Basel do you have any previous experience that you provide any technical or financial assistance to some country for the safe management or end use or the destruction. We are focusing on refrigeration because I understand that in Basel there are many waste and the electronic, plastic, and other. They are in the top priority of Basel, but refrigerant may be in the lower interest. So do you have any previous experience in such? Thank you very much.
We'll take one last question from Kuwait because we are already reaching the time. I would ask you some more 10 minutes of your time if you can stay for the follow back for the clarifications after. Kuwait, please.
Actually, it's not a question. It's just to elaborate what's the idea coming. As you mentioned that waste and use is a national determination from what I understand from your side. And for cooperation between the Basel and the Secretariat, I think the thing that you need to do is to do like a compiled notification or report between the two treaties, which will solve the issues. That if you have something as a used under Montreal Protocol and you want to Basel notify, this is the formula or this is the pre-notification that as a symbol as it's be, both entities is being notified and people can move within that one. You will not go for the intensive regime, especially that you are mentioning that it's a used for your national determination. But if it's waste, then you have this also another formulation because this will be mainly under Basel, but the Ozone Secretary have to be notified that this is a waste, not a reuse something. So this is just an idea coming to my mind with your intervention about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before handing over again to Francesca, just going back a little bit to Seychelles, because we received a similar question from Mauritius, UNDP, asking overall support on waste in general, that include everything. And our director of Chemicals and Waste Hub says that if we can solve a problem like this in an island, we can solve everywhere, because the island is really a worst case scenario. So we know that is problematic, and if you want to later take a bilateral, we suggest that you can further discuss the specific problem. Yeah, but yeah. And well, I actually have one question also for Francesca, for her to respond, because in the end these are guidelines, right? So just to clarify whether when these guidelines come in 2027, they will be enforced, meaning mandatory, or the countries can use these as real guidelines and adapt to the national circumstances to deal with the national problem, not exporting, not transmodary, but inside the country challenges of environmentally sound management of the e-waste. And one comment on my part also is that considering that basically I believe majority of countries here have already requested funding for ODS management and survey, you should also maybe consider investigating a little bit of policy coherence in the country, because we see cases, for example, that before even talking about exporting to to maybe recycling or destruction, there are countries that even transboundary movement between provinces is not allowed. We see cases here. I'm not going to nominate, but there are real cases where we face problems in our pilot projects in the past. And there are countries that the current legislation are kind of flexible, that you don't have written in the legislation that CFCs, HCFCs, for example, are by default waste. It leaves room for the operator to define if it can be recycled, so what you just put as used. But if it cannot be recycled, then it means that it's really waste, and then it kicks in all the environmental license, surcharges, tracking, that are required by the legislation of each country, which make the process much more expensive, as Ali from Saudi Arabia just mentioned, right? So we have just some food for thoughts that to take use of this window of opportunity to go over all these aspects. Yeah. So Francesca, over to you.
Before you take the floor, 1 minute. You ask about an example. The example that we dealt with was Helon. When we dealt with Helon between the two treaties, there was a very good example of Helon's, how we dealt with it previously.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very good suggestion. And for us, when we work on the movements of used or waste, we know we have to go to the competent authority and ask how they see a substance or an object, if it is used and it is seen as waste or not. So it is really under national legislation, this definition. So, for example, unused refrigerants, they can be considered substances which are not to be discarded in some countries. It depends on the legislation of Egypt. It really depends. So it has to be clarified at the national level if it is under the Basel Convention, if used is under the Basel Convention or not. And then also many countries define a waste by the type of disposal that it is operated on this used waste, product of waste. For example, many countries or the Basel Competent Authority will look at what is happening to a refrigerator. If it's being recycled, it will be defined in many countries as waste, just by the fact that some of the operations in Annex 4 of the Basel Convention, so the disposal operation, which includes also reclamation, recycling, are applied to that substance or that object. So there are different interpretations at the national level, and it's complicated. And these interpretations are also generated by the fact that the countries have adopted a very strict application of the Basel Convention. So it is necessary to have another category used, which is not under the convention. I would like to thank for this example of Halon, so we can analyze it and see which opportunities can raise, especially for a common notification system, especially now that under the Basel Convention there is a process to develop an e-PIC, a digitalized PIC procedure, which maybe can also be used for such kind of joint notifications. And the guidelines are not binding, so these are really guidelines to be taken and used. Also, we collect case studies, maybe in the future will be even revised, and these new case studies or new situations will be reflected. I would like to say that these guidelines, they are called guidance and guidance documents, because the parties to the Basel Convention developed technical guidelines on several waste streams, and these technical guidelines define what is ESM, and these are to be included at the national level as standards for managing certain waste streams. The technical guidelines are not legally binding, but to manage a waste in an ESM manner is a legally binding requirement, which is specified by non-legally binding technical guidelines, which become binding at the national level when they are introduced in the context and the situation of each country. So the technical guidelines under the Basel Convention have a very high level kind of value because they link how the countries will implement the ESM obligations under the convention. And this is guidance document because it's developed by the private sector also, with the participation of the private sector, and the parties participate, but it includes a lot of good practices which may be applied in a country or not. They are entirely to be adapted and used at the national level. They are really a tool for helping countries, and they are non-binding and at a lower level than the technical guidance. so even.
Thank you, Francesca. As you allow me 10 minutes, I'm going to abuse of you and just open for one last question from World Bank. And remind that we have a second session now after lunch, and we kind of suffered a little bit because we have 30 minutes less because of the previous delay. So if you, please, you are welcome to come back in the afternoon if you want to continue discussions and make follow-up questions. So.
Thank you very much. My name is Lulwa Ali. Actually, my question will be on my capacity from the expertise and knowledge of the Basel and other conventions. It's interesting that now we can allow the transboundary movement under the prior notification. This is interesting concept. And I think what we need to be careful about is one country accept to receive such hazardous waste. Not only that they have the capacity, but they have the strong regulatory framework and the stringent standards that they comply with. So this is one aspect, and this is in its own important for how to ensure this. On the international level, now that we, the Secretariat or the conventions allow this, what role do you have to ensure that those facilities, which most likely going to be operated under the private sector, really up to the standards that the expectations or the expectations of the conventions? What measures do you have or will have for the different streams of wastes? Now we're adding those under the Montreal Protocol. So I think while we are assuming there is capacity, we don't have to leave it up there, because we need to ensure through either third-party certification or audit or something else, not to leave it just to that, the country maybe they can say that they have the capacity, but then as an international community, we all party to ensure that.
This is a very important issue, and it's very difficult to deal with it. So what happened in the past? While developing the glossary of terms, the group of experts developed also criteria for facilities that the governments can adopt. These criteria are criteria to ensure that the facilities operate in an ESM manner. So in the clarification of what is ESM, in terms of operating a facility, these criteria were agreed upon. These are very general and apply to all the waste streams. But then in the technical guidelines or in the guidance documents, you always have a chapter which is called ESM criteria for facilities or for transboundary movements. And there, these general criteria which were agreed upon by the parties are declined for the specific waste stream. We have also here that chapter, ESM criteria for facilities and for the, not the transboundary movements, because in this guidance we just look at ESM. So this is a suggestion. And these are internationally agreed criteria. So this was the effort of the international community to agree upon a set of minimum requirements. Then there is cooperation at the regional level, at the sub-regional level. There are important workshops, opportunities where the countries exchange information on their real capacity. And these are very, very important occasions where the countries say, okay, here I think I'm exceeding, or a country says I sent it there, but then I didn't receive the confirmation. Or so these informal settings, which normally are set up in workshops, activities at the regional level by the regional centers, for example, these are the opportunities where this kind of information is exchanged. Then, at the international level, there is under the Basel Convention a discussion, but it's not agreed on having pre-consented facilities, for example. And this discussion is a new chapter that is being opened in a process which has been established at the past COP. It's a process whereby experts are trying to improve the PIC procedure. So they are collecting best practices, issues, but also recommendations on the way forward. And the pre-consented facilities where the wastes are going with a very light procedure because they are known to be very good and they are less controlled for that reason, are being discussed. But developing countries are not so much in favor. Some are, but some are very worried that they will become empty entities where to send and dump waste easily.
If I may also to respond, it is correct. Actually, this is a very important issue also to be one of the homework of the countries actually, because I believe we don't really have the tool in the secretariat to make sure that it will be ESM treated properly, something like that. But just to take a case on plastic waste, just to inform you, as I mentioned before, in 2019 we have 1,200 containers have to be repatriated because we are not really managing this plastic scrap transboundary properly. But after that, for example, in Indonesia, the Ministry of Environment also doing their homework, because in the past there are a lot of importers who are just only have office in the small office, and then when they have problem they will just run away and left the container there. This is the truth, and then that's why it become difficult to return all of those containers, because it is costly. It's really expensive. So the Ministry of Environment also did homework. They really checking on the plastic recycling facility in the country, and they just gave 50% quota of import of their capacity. For example, they have 1,000 plastics recycling per year. They will just give 50% because in the national level we also have a problem with the plastics. So the government pushed the recycling facility also to collect the plastic resources from the national level. So this is how one of the example of how in the future maybe in this kind of electronic transboundary also can be. I mean, the government may also have to think how to make sure that the incoming used electronic also will be treated properly in the national level. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the panelists for the good discussions, and have a good lunch. And remember, we will be here again 2 hours partially we're going to repeat these presentations, but it's also, as we expect more people coming, maybe the discussions will lead to other in interesting ways. So you are welcome to come and continue the discussion. Thank you. 2:30? Okay, 2:30, sorry. Yeah. 2:30, not 2. Thank you. And enjoy your lunch. Thank you.